like to share some thoughts around thinking, especially in relation to meditation, because we have been taught, or many have been taught, to try and stop thinking during meditation. And I've kind of learned that this is pretty much impossible for experience. There's almost like this belief somewhere along the line, we've kind of learned that thinking, or the mind and the soul, or the spirit, are two separate things. But this is not real. Is not the truth. The mind and the spirit are one. They are not separate. The mind, they might have different aspects, or they might have different qualities. The spirit being life, but the mind is also life, because where the spirit is, there is intelligence. Where life is, there is intelligence, and intelligence is in the mind. It's not outside the mind. But in duality, which is to experience oneself within a physical body and to be an isolated, separate identity that's disconnected from everything else outside itself, the mind has become fearful, and so the thoughts are very easily changed into fearful thoughts, because the mind is limited within a tiny field of experience, being the body experience. But the mind in its totality is a blessing. It is an absolute blessing, a beautiful experience of the self. And so the goal of meditation is not to still the mind, it's to still the negative thoughts, it's to still the egoic thoughts. But the goal, what I've learned through my meditations is for me, is to allow divine thoughts to come in, is to empty the mind of all the chatter, the egoic thoughts, and recognize those and get those to become quiet and still by not engaging in them, by keep checking them, recognizing that, okay, this is an egoic thought, this is my mind chatter, this is coming from fear, this is coming from judgments, this is not necessarily true. And just by keep checking in and recognizing, okay, I don't want to engage in this, and just try and still the mind that way, let the thoughts just disappear, because recognizing that you actually don't want to believe in those thoughts. And then once you stop giving them your willpower, they will diminish. And then in that space of quietness, then beautiful thoughts, divine thoughts, godly thoughts, the thoughts of the self start coming in. And that, for me, is where the gem is. So it's not to get out of the mind, because that's impossible. You cannot get out of the mind. We are within, once you realize that you are created within the mind of God, we are a thought of God. God had a thought to give life, and so expanded himself out into the universe, or created the universe, created everything from itself, himself, and that we are part of that. So we're still there within the mind of God. So you cannot actually get out of the mind, because we are the mind. We are, the mind is spiritual, it's non-physical, and spiritual, the spiritual soul, or the spiritual self, is also non-physical, and so the mind and the spirit are not apart. They are one together, and recognizing that we actually want those thoughts, because when we have those thoughts, they are the most glorious, the most beautiful, the most holy thoughts of who we are. They're not these evil, dark, fearful thoughts. But that is all created through the egoic mind, which is an isolated mind. So during these meditations for myself, I usually focus on something that I want to understand. I need to understand. I need to bring clarity into my mind. Something I need to be answered. That needs to be answered for me. Because, like I've said before, I often start my meditations when there's a fear that's come into my mind, and so I want that answered. So I don't want to try and answer it myself. I don't want to start, looking outside myself or looking at other people and start judging them and saying they're the cause of my fear, and my fear has come from this, and my fear has come from that, and the reason this is happening is because of this. So I'm not kind of playing in the stories. What I'm doing is I'm actually saying I don't know, and I'm asking for the truth. And then once I go into a meditation, I focus on that for a moment. I want to know the truth. I don't want to know an illusion. I actually just want to know the truth. And then I sit there, and then as the quietness comes, the mind starts filling with the most beautiful thoughts, which I know are not my thoughts, because they are just profound. I couldn't answer these thoughts myself, as an egoic identity, as a separate self. I couldn't actually answer these myself. I recognize that. And so these beautiful thoughts, these loving, forgiving thoughts, these very expansive thoughts start entering into the mind, and they answer everything for me. And sometimes I have to actually run through a little bit of a process within myself, where I start, it depends how I'm feeling at the time and how far I need to go. But sometimes I start with, I start looking at different parts of my body. I look at my foot and I say, or my feet, and I say, my feet is not who I am, because I know that if I lost my feet, I'm still me, and if I lost my hands, I'm still me, and if I lost my legs, I'm still me, and if I lost my arms, I'm still me. So I go through this little process of looking at my legs, looking at my hands, looking at my arms, looking at my body, looking at my stomach, looking at my lungs, looking at my heart, looking at my chest, looking at my back, looking at my spine, looking at my neck, looking at my ears, my eyes, my nose, my mouth, my head, my brain, and looking at each thing individually and saying, this is not me, this is not me. And then once I've gone through my whole body, and you can do it in lumps, you don't have to do each organ individually, you can, whatever works for you. Once I've got to that place where I've actually come to the top of my head now, and I've recognized that everything here is not who I am, then the question just automatically arises, well, who am I? And in that, there's an unflowering that happens, and then you actually start to realize that you're actually not the body, and you're not in the body, that you're actually outside the body. Your spirit and the life force is permeating the body, but the body cannot contain who we are, because the body is a tiny identity, but the self is a infinitely expanded being of light. So the body is a place of darkness, where this beam of light has come in and lost knowledge, lost itself in darkness, and through that darkness is miscreating. So once I get to see myself, that I'm actually not even in the body, I'm actually outside the body, and therefore my mind is now expanded out and opened up, then I just sit there and I let the wisdom come in, and I let the teachings come in. And that, for me, has been life-changing, has been absolutely life-changing, because it really just shows, not only does it answer the fear, which I first approached the meditation in, so I came to the meditation with a fear that undone. I don't want to answer it. I just want it undone. And then it actually gets answered. It gets answered in the most beautiful way, and it's always in relation to looking outside. So it's always a judgment that we're making on the world, or a judgment we're making on another person, or even just a self-doubt, like a fear of self-doubt, a questioning, am I good enough? Can I do this? Can I do that? Which direction should I take? You can ask any question. And once you get to that place that you actually recognize that you're not the body, and the mind, and once you realize that you're not the body, the mind goes quiet by itself. You don't have to do anything. The mind just becomes peaceful, because the body really is where fears are created. And then once you realize that you're not the body, the fears are undone. So you enter into a state of peacefulness, and then from that, the answers start coming, and the wisdom starts coming, and it starts answering the problem from within that space, which is an infinite space of creation. And so it forgives everything, it forgives everybody, and you learn about yourself, and you learn about yourself in reality, and you learn about what reality is. Now, for me, this is the goal of meditation. It's not to still the mind, it's not to try and escape thoughts. Because I've recognized that that's impossible. You cannot escape thoughts. We are thoughts. We are created in the mind of God. We are ultimately a thought of God. That is basically our creation. That was our starting point. That's where we came from. We are a creative thought of God. And so we are created within the mind of God. We still are within the mind of God, and we are creative. So we are creating like God. But if we have lost ourselves in this darkness of ignorance and see ourselves as physical bodies, we've lost the knowledge of ourselves, then we're just basically miscreating, and that is what is causing us to suffer. Now, to undo that is liberation. Is self-realization, is salvation, is freedom. It's freedom from oppression, freedom from all the rules of the world and the laws of the world, freedom from other people's, it's freedom from society, it's freedom from normality that has, become a sickness in the world, because normal has become a sickness in the world. And so it's freedom from all of this, and so the world becomes a place of beauty again. You start to listen to the birds, and you're grateful for the sounds of the birds. You listen to the water, and you're filled with gratitude. And beautiful little cats just arrived here to come and say hello. Everything becomes. You become grateful for everything, because everything becomes your friend, and everything becomes part of yourself, and there's nothing outside of that. So meditation can take you here. It takes a while. I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight, and it's going to happen in one meditation. It's taken me quite a few years, but they've been beautifully profound years, and every step along the way takes you another run up the ladder, and therefore your mind just starts to flower more and more open, more and more open, and more and more open. Doesn't mean that sometimes it doesn't contract and we go back into this fearful state. Doesn't mean that, but it does mean that we get out of that much quicker, because now we have experience. Now we maintain, or we retain the memory of it's almost like the magnetic pull of creation, the magnetic pull of reality is always pulling us home. The magnetic pull of God is always pulling us home, and basically it's a love. It's the pull of love that is guiding us home. And once we've experienced that, you cannot not know it, because experience is knowing. And once we've experienced this, we can't forget it. You cannot forget it. You can forget it. You could choose to forget it, but you won't forget it forever. It will eventually come back into the mind again, and the mind will flower again. But if you're willing for that flowering to be happening on a daily basis, and especially when you catch yourself in those dark places where you become completely lost, once you've had that experience, it's basically like a revelation. It's a flowering of the mind. It's an opening up of, into the seventh chakra or into the divine chakra. And once you've had that experience, you know that you can get there. You know what's there. So even though you've become lost and confused, you now have this anchor, this rope that you can pull on, and you can drag yourself out of the mud, And it's not difficult. It's just really just a surrendering in the meditation, opening up. Simple process for me. Just scan the body, realize that everything in the body I'm not. Everything in the body is not who I am, or is not who you are. And then once you get to that point of seeing yourself where you're actually outside of the body, that the body cannot contain you, because who you are is infinite, and this tiny limited body cannot contain infinity, and cannot contain eternity, and cannot contain what is timeless, because the body is also in time, and the spirit and the mind is timeless. And so, we pull ourselves out of the mud, we pull ourselves out of the darkness, and we become the lotus flower again, and the mind opens up, and we enter back into that space of beauty and wisdom and knowledge. And then we step back into the world again, and we can function better. The world brings us constant gifts, constant blessings. Everyone we meet becomes a blessing to us. There's no curses anymore. And we can forgive everybody, everything, because we recognize that everything is actually just a mistaken identity. Whatever happened, or whatever is happening is really just a mistaken identity. And once we realize our identity, we realize everybody else's identity, and therefore we cannot judge them, we cannot be careless about them, we cannot hate them, and we cannot condemn them, because we will be condemning ourselves. And that is really the crucifixion. We are condemning each other with our insane thoughts, with our hateful thoughts, our thoughts of judgment thoughts, And so these meditations basically liberate you from crucifying yourself, because even though we think we're projecting those thoughts outside onto other people or onto other situations or onto other things, we're actually crucifying ourselves. So really it's, meditation is like the path of resurrection, it's the second coming, it's the opening up of the Christ consciousness within the mind, and seeing ourselves for who we are.